Well, good morning, friends. How are you? Happy Monday. I wanted to jump on and give you a super quick tutorial about digestion. Now, I know you know how it works, but this is how I've explained it to my patients for many, many years. And when I was teaching continuing education seminars for all those years, it was amazing how many times at the end of this session of the seminar, this section of the seminar, that practitioners would come up, doctors would come up and take pictures of the drawing. I would do it on like a whiteboard or like a flip chart or something. So I'm going to show you how I taught digestion to my patients. And once they understand the concept of basically how it works, they are so much more compliant with what you give them because they understand the mechanics of how it works. So I'm just going to make it super simple. So I'm going to show you, and I'm not an artist, so full disclaimer here, but I don't care. And in my office, when I have my brick and mortar practice, I have this same whiteboard, and this thing is huge. It's just giant. But I have this same whiteboard in my office, and this is what I would draw on. So let me show you how this works. So here's the esophagus coming down, and then we've got the stomach, the body and the fundus of the stomach. This comes over into the duodenum, right? So this is where we have the pyloric sphincter. And then this is the C-shaped duodenum. And then from here, it goes on down with the rest of so this is the duodenum and then the jejunum here. So here's the sphincter of Oddi right here. So I kind of draw all this and I say, okay, this is all going to make sense in a little bit. You know, I'm going to show you, but let's start with the top. So you eat the food. This is how I would draw it for the patients. I say, okay, you eat the food. I'm going to make food orange. So you eat the food. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing. We got this. I always draw this right here. And this is the diaphragm. And this is the sphincter, right? The cardiac sphincter. Sorry, I forgot that part. So I go, here you go. Here you're going to eat your food. So your food comes down. You've chewed it up. It's in these smaller pieces. It comes down. It gets through. And all this food comes down in your stomach, and it's like, you know, moving around in here, and it works its way down. And in the stomach, you've got special cells that are meant to release secretions that help to break this food down. Now, these cells are called parietal cells, and these parietal cells line the lining of the stomach like this, and they go all the way around. They're mostly up in here, but they're all the way around. And they line the stomach, and they secrete in here something called hydrochloric acid, and we'll just abbreviate that HCl. And they go, oh, yeah, I get that. And I say, okay, so then the hydrochloric acid kind of gets, and I'm just putting little dots on here. I don't know if you can see it on there, but I kind of just put little dots on here. I'm like, the hydrochloric acid and other secretions come in here, and they mix with this food. Now, this acid, as you might imagine, is pretty acid. It's pretty low. So it's at a 1.5 pH. And that's important for you to know. So this 1.5 pH is important. So now all of this food is mixing with this acidic liquid in here, and it's breaking it down. And as it breaks down, it's breaking into smaller and smaller and smaller little pieces, so that the little pieces come over here, and there's like a little regulator valve over here. And so not all of this goes this way, only just a little bit at a time goes. And so this 1.5 pH, this right here is called chyme. And this chyme is just the name of the bolus or the mixture of food. So the chyme comes over here, and the door opens, and it lets this food come over here. Now remember that this food that comes over has a pH of 1.5, but that's a bit of a problem because the duodenum does not like this acid. It does not like it. This is the duodenum over here. This is the next stop. It does not like the acid. And so over here, this pH needs to be 4.5. And so we need to get this food changed into a 4.5. But when we get an acid, this 1.5 that comes where this 4.5 in, it triggers a release of bile from your liver. And so your liver is over here hanging out. Your big old liver is over here. And it's got this tiny little sac on it called the gallbladder. And the gallbladder releases its bile right through this little hole right here. And that bile comes in, and then you've got the pancreas over here. And the pancreas releases its juices into the same little sphincter. And I tell them what the sphincter is called. And I say, these secretions right here from the gallbladder and from the pancreas change that food. They change the pH into a 4.5. And that's actually what triggers the release of these two secretions. So it's when the acidic material comes into the duodenum that the duodenum goes, oh my gosh, we can't have that in here. And all of a sudden bile starts pumping in, and pancreatic fluid, juices and enzymes, etc., start pumping in. And that's what makes it a 4.5. So in order for this to happen, we need this to happen, because this signals, this acidic food that's coming in here, this chyme, is what signals the release of this and changes the pH to 4.5. Now, what happens to the food is, as soon as it comes in contact with this right here, all of a sudden the food then gets broken down all the way into the teeniest, tiniest little specks. I don't know if you guys can see those, but the teeniest, tiniest little specks, and then off they go down to be digested. This big chunks of food up here, those cannot be digested. That does not work. Your jejunum doesn't know this absorption down here. It can't absorb these, but it can absorb the teeny tiny little pieces. And I always tell them, think of food like you would think of, like if you think of this as a 2x4 or a piece of a 2x4, then as it gets broken down, it's getting broken down into toothpicks. And then these toothpicks, when they come in contact with this, are broken down into tiny little slivers or splinters. That's how I always explain it. And they go, oh, I get it. But the point that I want to make is, when I make this drawing, it's all messy. Do you see? It doesn't have to be perfect, but they get it. So then what I'll do is I kind of will start over, and I won't start over for you guys, but like I'll erase all this food, and I say, okay, you've got food coming in, but what happens is you've done Tums and you've done all this other stuff, and we still have this 1.5 that we need. But this is what I'll tell them. I say, you're eating the food, but the problem is that instead of your gut being at a 1.5 pH, it's at a 6.0, because you're taking Tums or Rolaids or, a PPI or an H2 blocker or whatever. Your pH is now a 6.0. So now your food comes in and it just sits here, and it just sits here because there's no acid in the stomach. The hydrochloric acid is not working. So this food just sits here and sits here and sits here and sits here and sits here. And you're not going to have anything great to run down in the duodenum. We're definitely not going to have this happen, because as soon as this food sits in here, the body's like, I need to do something with this, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to make it better. So I'm just going to start secreting whatever I can in there. And what happens is we end up with this really not so awesome like this. It starts getting real messy in there because we don't have enough of this hydrochloric acid. And so it's starting to get kind of messy and all like jumbly and liquidy. And when that happens, the body doesn't want this mess. It wants it at 1.5 in order for this to work over here. But when this doesn't work, then this goes all crazy like this. And then pretty soon what happens? We end up with reflux. And at that point, the patient is like, oh, is that what happens? And I say, okay, so how are we going to fix this? And they get it. I said, what's the very first thing we need to fix? The very first thing. And they will go, oh, I get it. I need to fix this. We got to make this better. We got to get the pH down. I go, yes. And how are we going to do that? We're going to use bitters. We're going to use Digest Forte. We're going to use Zypan, whatever you want to use. And then they get it. And I say, okay, so as soon as we get the pH to here, then when the food does leave here, now we can finish the rest of digestion and make it all work. And this over here is why you feel bloated when you wake up in the morning. And this drawing is like the simplest drawing ever, but it works so well to help the patient understand what's really happening in their digestive system. And listen, friend, you could do the same thing when you're talking about whatever it is. You're talking about brain or gut brain inflammation or whatever it is. You could use this same principle just as easily with your patients by just drawing it out. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So don't let your lack of artist skills, of which I am king, but I've drawn this a lot of times, but it's still not great. I had to really think like, oh, is this the right way the liver is shaped? I think it might go the right way or wrong. I'm bad about that. So don't let that stop you. Just get one of those flip charts from Office Depot or somewhere. Put it in your office and in your consultation room and just start drawing things, and then let the patients take a picture of it, because then they can go home and they'll show their family like, oh my gosh, look what I learned today. And when this happens, and then all this, and then over here, and they're going to do their best. But you look like a superstar because you explained it. You didn't just send the patient home with a bunch of supplements and a whole bunch of handouts or a supplement sheet. And they're like, I don't know what I'm taking and I don't know why. This is so foundational. This is so foundational. Now, coming up soon in another practice growth strategy, I'm going to go over the endocrine system and how you can explain that to your patients as well. So for now, digestive primer for patients right here. Take care, guys. See you next week.